In this video, we're going to go through a tricky concept that I call false contrast. What I mean by that is we have a shift word, such as in this case, though, and instead of being the opposite of the part that comes right after though, the sentence is about something else. In this case, though less celebrated, Haydn was far more blank than Mozart. So he's not as popular as Mozart, therefore he's more what? Well, a bunch of things could probably go in here. I mean, he could be more friendly, he could definitely be more talented, maybe he's even more structured. And so we really need to read the entire sentence in order for us to really figure out what word fits in the blank. And so that's the thing. Always read the entire sentence, because sometimes, this is rare though, but sometimes it's not as always the exact opposite of what you think, a word that's right near a shift word. Now if we read on, we can see here the sentence structure is such that there's a or colon followed by some information. Mozart had 41 symphonies, Haydn penned 106. Aha! Haydn penned more symphonies than Mozart. So it's all about being more, well, more what? What's that word where you create many things? Well, if it doesn't come to mind, you definitely know it's not obscure or unknown. Friendliness doesn't really have much to do with it. And talented. Well, because you write more, does that necessarily mean you're talented? It could mean you're talented, maybe it does, but that's not the direct meaning of creating a lot. And so we get rid of talented. Same with structured. We don't know anything about the symphonies. I mean, maybe they were more structured, but the word prolific directly means creating more of something. In this case, Haydn was more prolific as far as symphonies go. So again, read the entire sentence, not always the exact opposite. Note sentence structure, as we did here. And then finally, make sure you pay attention to multiple keywords. Here, there really aren't multiple keywords. I mean, sure, we have less celebrated. That really turned out to be kind of like a decoy or a fake, something that didn't really apply to the sentence as much as the actual keywords here. Now, the thing about this false contrast is it becomes much more likely the more convoluted a sentence becomes. And this sentence is anything but convoluted. It's pretty straightforward. So let's take a look at another more convoluted sentence. Even though Malcolm X eventually went on to sever ties with members of the Muslim Brotherhood, the Brotherhood believed that far from being a heretic, Malcolm X endorsed a view of Islam that was more doctrinally blank than that of the more ostensibly orthodox sects. So obviously a lot going on here, and we see even though, right? Starts off there with a shift. Well, he went on to sever ties with these people. Therefore, he's the opposite of somebody who severs ties. So it's not really clear. Sure, the word in here is going to be something positive because, you have him severing ties. Ooh, that's negative, and the shift shows us there's probably something positive. But that leaves us with both A, pure, and B, renowned, or well-known. Compromise means kind of a lower quality, vague, is something that's not clear. It's also negative. And differentiated is just a neutral word. So, of course, we're going for something here that is positive, and that's why we're left with A and B. But as you can see, the first part doesn't help us out. Therefore, again, read the entire sentence. So note the sentence structure, read the entire sentence, and notice that it's not always the exact opposite of what we'd be led to expect. So the sentence structure here is there's a lot more going on. Far from being a heretic specifically is kind of this hidden keyword embedded down here. And so they didn't see this guy as a heretic, someone that went against the teachings. Far from it, his teachings were more, well, close to the actual thing. And that's why pure works here. Renowned, just because something is well known doesn't mean that it is closer to the actual doctrine. Again, a heretic goes away from the doctrine, says stuff that isn't true religiously, whereas the opposite of that would be someone whose doctrine is pure. So renowned doesn't quite get there, and you can see that, again, the more convoluted it becomes, the more we're going to be kind of led astray by some of what looks like keywords when they're actually going to be multiple keywords, and the more specific keyword here is far from, meaning the opposite of being a heretic. Now, we could end it right there, but why not try an even more difficult, more convoluted text completion? And this is kind of getting you prepared for the double and triple blank text completions. You can see this one right here. Woo! I know, scary. Very long, and yes, most one blank text completions are not going to be this long. Because, again, this is to show you some of how you can be led astray or be uncertain about certain parts of a sentence and then not be able to pick between two answer choices because they both seem to work. So pause the video because I'm actually not going to read this. Way too long. And after you've done pausing this video, let's go through it. Okay, so let's start off with the beginning. no less incendiary, so very controversial. It's a hot button issue, fracking. So you get all of this information, and then you still have this to read. Has been curiously absent from the national dialogue come election time, perhaps because voters are typically blank environmental problems that do not occur in their backyard, so to speak. And so you have this other part that shows you, yeah, it's a really controversial issue, but it's not really around that much when it's time for election time. People aren't actually talking about it. It's not what makes them vote for one candidate over the other. So it seems like their voters are typically what about environmental problems that do not occur in their own backyards? What does this have to do with anything? And so here we have this little part that says a practice that mostly takes place in remote parts of the country. And that's the whole idea of these multiple keywords. Most of the times they're there for a reason. And so this part that it's controversial, sure, it kind of helps you, but it doesn't give you something specific as you need, as the fact that this is something that doesn't happen. That is, fracking is something that doesn't happen in people's backyards. And therefore, this is something that voters are typically what? Well, this is not something that suddenly becomes that incendiary. It may be incendiary generally, but then, controversial, but then come election time, they kind of forget about it. Are they misinformed about it? Let's go through the answer choices now. Well, just because you're not really that swayed by it or motivated by it, it doesn't ruffle your feathers, this whole idea of fracking during election time, it's not the same as actually being misinformed or misguided about it. Worked up over is kind of the opposite of what we're going for here. We're going for something that doesn't mean we're getting upset, but we actually don't care about this really controversial issue, or an issue that's usually really controversial. And that leaves us with C, unmoved by, where if you're unmoved by something, it doesn't affect you emotionally. Disenfranchised, that just has to do with vote. So if you take away the ability for someone to vote, that person has become disenfranchised. So that's a trap answer because it kind of captures the general context here. So get rid of that. And smitten with means just in love with, again, which is the opposite of this whole idea of unemotional or unmoved by, which is answer C. So again, get ready for the kind of these false contrasts and the more difficult 2 and 3 blank text completions. But here's a good example just to see how it works in a 1 blank text completion. And again, I don't want people to think, oh, this is really hard, this was blowing my mind. This is supposed to be really hard. This was much harder than the other 2. So again, work your way up to it, and you can always come back to these lesson videos once you've done a bunch of practice questions in the product and have gotten better at text completions. Come back to this, try it again without looking at the answer, and see what happens.